The chamber was half full, buzzing with low chatter and the rustling of papers. It was just another oversight hearing, scheduled without much fanfare, until Karoline Leavitt walked in. The moment she took her seat across from Representative Ilhan Omar, a sudden hush settled over the room. Staffers exchanged looks. They'd all seen clips before. But no one expected these two women, on opposite ends of America's most volatile cultural divide, to go head-to-head that morning. Karoline adjusted the microphone in front of her, flipping through her binder of notes. Her cross necklace glinted beneath the collar of her navy blazer. She was poised but focused, scanning the room like she already sensed the weight of what was about to happen. Across from her, Ilhan Omar sipped from a paper cup, scrolling on her phone, unfazed. She had just come off a segment on MSNBC where she had described Trump-era policies as systemic white nationalism wrapped in a flag. The first question was procedural. A Democrat from California asked about proposed amendments to an immigration bill. Omar responded sharply, connecting the bill to historical violence fueled by xenophobia. Her voice rose with emotion. We cannot forget that many of these policies were written by people who didn't even believe in the humanity of the immigrants they were targeting. Karoline looked up slowly. Her fingers tapped the edge of the table. A staffer behind her leaned in, whispering something. Karoline didn't respond, her eyes were locked on Omar. And then she pressed her mic. Madam Chair, Karoline began, I would like to respond. The chairwoman hesitated. Miss Leavitt, go ahead. Karoline sat forward. Representative Omar just described an entire wing of the American electorate as driven by hate. These voters are not lobbyists, not corporate elites. They are single mothers in Indiana, truck drivers in Texas, farmers in upstate New York. Many of them supported Donald Trump not out of hate, but because they believe in borders, in sovereignty, in law and order. Ilhan smiled thinly but said nothing. Karoline continued, voice rising slightly. You paint them as dangerous. But they built the roads we drive on, the schools our children attend. And you can mock them all you want from your cable news hits, but they're the backbone of this country. And if you dismiss them, you're not just dismissing a party. You're dismissing America. Gasps echoed across the room. A few aides lowered their heads. Even the chairwoman blinked. Ilhan turned toward Karoline now, her expression suddenly colder. Are you implying I don't belong here? Karoline didn't flinch. I'm implying you don't speak for the country that gave you the opportunity to stand there. And frankly, Representative, if you hate what built this nation, freedom, faith, family, then say it outright. The room froze. The C-SPAN feed, running quietly in the corner, was about to go viral. For a second, the entire chamber sat frozen, like the pause before a thunderclap. Karoline's final words, then say it outright, hung in the air like a challenge, not just to Ilhan, but to everyone watching. The C-SPAN live stream began to spike in viewership. Political Twitter lit up. Clips were already being clipped. Ilhan Omar adjusted her hijab and leaned into the mic with deliberate calm. Ms. Leavitt, she began, her voice tightly controlled, you are not in a campaign rally. You're in a government chamber. And while you talk about love of country, your party enabled an insurrection against it. The jab was surgical, but Karoline didn't blink. Omar continued, when people wave Confederate flags and chant about reclaiming America, it's not about border policy. It's about exclusion. It's about silencing people like me, immigrants, women, Muslims. So if I call that what it is, hate, don't you dare twist it into patriotism. Karoline sat forward slowly, eyes locked on Omar. No one's silencing you, Congresswoman. In fact, you're the one with the national platform, the primetime interviews, the fawning Vanity Fair spreads. You've made a career out of tearing down the very nation that welcomed you. A low rumble of reaction spread across the gallery. Karoline continued, and you know what really gets me? You claim moral high ground, but you never miss a moment to smear anyone who disagrees with your worldview. You paint conservatives as evil, Trump supporters as racist, Christians as backwards. And then you call that inclusion? Ilhan interrupted, because they are excluded. Karoline cut in, voice sharp now. No, they're ignored. They're told they don't matter unless they kneel at the altar of your ideology. But guess what? Those same Americans still show up. They pay taxes. They raise families. They pray. And they vote. Omar looked taken aback. Karoline pressed forward. You say you want unity, but you vilify anyone who sees the world differently. That's not progress. That's tyranny wearing a smile. Murmurs rippled again through the audience. Ilhan tightened her lips. This country isn't just for people who look, think, and pray like you. Karoline's response came instantly, exactly. And it's not just for people who hate it either. The room went dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. The chairwoman tapped her gavel, not to interrupt, but to remind everyone this wasn't a debate stage. Too late. The fire was lit. The silence after Karoline's last line was deafening. Ilhan Omar didn't immediately respond. Her fingers drummed once on the desk, searching for a tone that wouldn't give away how hard she'd just been hit rhetorically. But Karoline had shattered the glass, and now, every viewer was waiting to see how Omar would climb out of it. I don't hate America, Ilhan finally said, but there was a tremble underneath the words. I'm trying to fix it. Karoline didn't hesitate. You don't fix something by setting it on fire. Omar sat back, bristling. You call critique arson because you've never lived on the margins. You've never been profiled, surveilled, detained. Karoline leaned into the mic. My family's from working-class New Hampshire. My dad worked third shift. My mom homeschooled us between 2 jobs. And guess what? They never told me this country owed me anything. They told me to fight for what I believe, and be grateful I could. A few Republican members nodded visibly behind her. Karoline's voice sharpened. America isn't perfect, but it's exceptional. And when you stand on the Capitol floor talking about dismantling systems of oppression, let's be honest, what you really mean is dismantling faith, borders, and tradition, everything that holds this republic together. Omar's eyes narrowed. You can't separate tradition from what it's built on. Slavery, colonization, xenophobia, that's your foundation. Karoline didn't flinch. And yet here you are, an elected congresswoman, free to criticize every inch of the soil you stand on. Isn't that ironic? Boom. That line alone went viral within seconds. Omar pushed back from her seat. You're twisting this into theater. Karoline stood up, slowly, with composure. No, Congresswoman. You've been staging theater for years. I'm here to bring receipts. She held up a stack of printed tweets, floor speeches, and interview transcripts. Here's you calling America a system of hate. Here's you mocking the Constitution. Here's you telling a Somali crowd we need to uproot U.S. foreign policy. That's not constructive criticism. That's demolition. The chamber was no longer quiet. Audible gasps. Whispered remarks. One Democrat looked visibly uncomfortable. Karoline turned to face the rest of the room. There are people out there who still believe in this country. Who raise flags, not fists. Who teach their kids to pray, not riot. And they're tired of being told they don't belong in their own homeland. She looked back at Omar. You hate what built this nation. Then you don't get to lecture us on how to fix it. The gavel pounded again, but this time the moment had already landed. And the internet was already on fire. The media was already spinning. Clips of Karoline's remarks had flooded social platforms within hours. Fox News replayed her confrontation on a loop, while MSNBC tried to frame her as performing outrage. But even critics admitted, she didn't flinch, didn't fold, and didn't deliver a line she couldn't back up. Ilhan Omar, however, wasn't done. She requested time to respond the next morning, this time, from a rally in her district, flanked by progressive allies and microphones bearing every major outlet's logo. She didn't hold back. She is the face of a new, dangerous nationalism, Omar said. A woman trained by propaganda networks, trained to smile while she undermines everything this country could be. Karoline was watching live, arms folded. They want to wrap the flag around fear and call it patriotism, Omar continued. They don't want to build, they want to dominate. And then she smirked. She reads facts off a paper, but she doesn't read the room. The crowd laughed. The media pounced. That line went viral in seconds. But Karoline didn't blink. 2 hours later, she stepped into a podcast studio in D.C., unannounced, and delivered what would become the most shared 5-minute takedown of the year. She looked straight into the camera. No notes. No script. Ilhan, you said I don't read the room? I've been reading it for years. I read the room in blue-collar New Hampshire, where people are sick of being mocked for their values. I read the room in swing districts where parents are rising up. I read the room in church basements, town halls, union meetings. And I promise you this, those rooms don't look anything like the echo chamber you stand in. The podcast host leaned back, stunned. Karoline wasn't finished. You say I was trained? I was trained in truth. I was trained by real Americans who fought to keep this country free, who bled for it. You think my conviction is a performance? I think your cynicism is. Her tone darkened just slightly. You wrap your message in identity politics and expect no one to question your intent. But I will. Because I don't care about your labels, I care about your language. And your language divides. Boom. The clip hit 5 million views before sundown. She stood up, unhooked her mic, and thanked the host with a firm handshake. As she left the studio, her team was already getting calls, from donors, supporters, and even moderate Democrats, saying the same thing. She said what we've been afraid to say. Ilhan didn't take it well. Karoline's podcast clip had dominated the feed, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, even Facebook. It wasn't just conservatives sharing it. Independents were reposting her words with captions like, "Finally, she said it," and "Truth over theater." But in Ilhan's world, silence meant surrender. So she fired back. This time, on a panel at Columbia University, seated between 2 liberal professors and a European journalist who barely concealed her contempt for American populism. Karoline Leavitt speaks with confidence. I'll give her that, Ilhan began, brushing imaginary lint off her sleeve. But when you strip away the performance, what's left? Rhetoric, recycled fear. Nostalgia for a country that never existed for many of us. She paused. She wants you to believe her version of patriotism is universal. It's not. It's exclusion dressed as love. The auditorium erupted into applause. CNN clipped it within minutes. Omar levels Levit, the headline read. But back in D.C., Karoline was already writing. Not a thread. Not a clapback tweet. A full speech. The next morning, she stepped onto the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, not just for photo ops, but to deliver it live. Microphones out, flags waving. No podium, just her. You say I speak for a version of America that never existed, Karoline began. Well, Ilhan, maybe that's because you've never wanted to see it. A hush fell. I speak for the factory worker who clocked in before sunrise, not for applause but because his family depends on it. I speak for the single mom who believes in discipline and grace, who still bows her head before dinner. I speak for the immigrant who came here legally, worked hard, waved the flag, and now hears you mock the country that gave him a future. Her voice cut through the fall air like a bell. You say I sell fear. No. I expose it. Because the only thing today's ruling class fears is a nation that remembers who it is. Crowd, roaring. Even journalists from NPR took notes with raised brows. Then she leaned in. You say my patriotism excludes people. No, ma'am, yours divides them. By race, by grievance. By guilt. You built a platform out of partition. I'm building one from principle. She held up a printed transcript of Ilhan's Columbia remarks. And to be clear, I didn't need the last word. But I'll always bring the last fact. Ilhan Omar's team scrambled. Karoline's Lincoln Memorial speech wasn't just trending, it was spreading. Cable news cut into regular programming to replay it. X, formerly Twitter, labeled it a national moment. Even normally left-leaning outlets couldn't deny the power of her words. Whether you agree or disagree, one anchor admitted, Levit is tapping into something visceral. Ilhan couldn't let that stand. She rushed a response, this time, live on MSNBC's The Readout. Joy Reid gave her the floor. Karoline Leavitt's speech, Joy began with a smirk, has conservatives celebrating. But you were there at Columbia, you know the truth. What was it really? Ilhan leaned forward, every syllable calculated. It was theater, polished. Dramatic. But dangerous. She speaks of unity while signaling to division. Patriotism, she calls it? No. It's performance for clicks. Joy nodded. And the crowd? Ilhan scoffed. Crowds cheered for McCarthy too. Noise doesn't equal wisdom. Clip went viral, among MSNBC's base. But something backfired. In calling Karoline a performer, Ilhan triggered a deeper reaction, from people who once liked her. An Iraqi-American small business owner posted. I came here to escape lies. I hear more truth in Karoline's voice than all the politics from Ilhan this year. A young black Navy veteran wrote, we served for this flag. Karoline's the first one I've seen lately who remembers that. Karoline didn't even respond directly. Instead, she visited a VFW post in Pennsylvania the next day. No cameras. No press. Just veterans and families. She listened, took notes. Thanked them, but one moment leaked. A woman in her 60s stood up. Ms. Levit, she said, my son died in Afghanistan. People mock what we believe. They call it performative. But you just say it like it is. Thank you. Karoline didn't speak for 5 full seconds. Then she quietly replied. I'm sorry for your loss. And I promise, ma'am, I will never use your sacrifice as a prop. I will honor it with truth. Someone recorded it on their phone. It spread like wildfire. And when Ilhan tried one more time, tweeting that Karoline was using pain to build a platform, it flopped. Because now, Karoline wasn't trending. She was resonating. 2 days later, Karoline entered the Capitol Rotunda carrying a folded American flag. It wasn't a prop. It wasn't theatrical. It was the flag given to a Gold Star family from Wisconsin, whose son died in Fallujah. Karoline had asked the mother's permission to bring it to the floor, not for show, but to make a point Ilhan Omar couldn't ignore. Speaker Johnson allowed Karoline to address the chamber for 5 minutes under special recognition. As she stepped to the podium, all cameras rolled. The silence was electric. I bring before this body, she began, not a speech, not a soundbite, but the memory of sacrifice. She held up the folded flag. This flag draped over the casket of a 22-year-old Marine. His mother gave it to me because she said Washington forgot him. She asked me to remind you. Karoline turned toward Ilhan's row, but Ilhan kept her eyes down, unmoved. I heard Representative Omar say I was performing. That I was manufacturing emotion. But this flag is not fiction. This flag is not theater. It is what her words have forgotten. America isn't built by critics. It's built by sacrifice. Some members applauded quietly. Others held back. But the gallery, visitors from around the country, rose to their feet. Ilhan stayed seated. Karoline finished, to every American who still loves this flag, you are not alone. You are not invisible. And I will not let you be erased. She laid the folded flag gently on the podium, then stepped back. The image flooded social media. The phrase, Ilhan refused to look, started trending within minutes. One viral post read. Karoline brought a flag. Ilhan brought excuses. We see the difference. Another said. She didn't wave it. She didn't weaponize it. She honored it. Ilhan's office went into silence mode. But Karoline? She didn't stick around for the cameras. She walked straight from the floor to the mother who had loaned her the flag, waiting in the hallway, tears in her eyes. Thank you for not letting him be forgotten, the woman said. Karoline hugged her back. America won't forget him. Not if I have anything to do with it. Within hours of Karoline's flag tribute going viral, Ilhan Omar's team issued a statement. It was cold. Clinical. Congress is a place of policymaking, not political theater. We should honor service by improving healthcare, not by waving flags. The backlash was immediate. One X, formerly Twitter, reply shot to 3 million views in 30 minutes. So honoring the fallen is political theater? Ilhan, this is why Americans are tuning you out. Ilhan went further on MSNBC that night. Sitting with host Mehdi Hassan, she leaned in and said with a sigh. I think some people in Congress want to look patriotic, but they're just playing dress-up. You saw it. She brought a flag like it's a campaign rally. It was performative. Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't schedule a press conference. She didn't issue a rebuttal. She uploaded a clip. It was from 2019, Ilhan Omar on the House floor, waving a Palestinian flag as she condemned U.S. foreign policy and called Israel an apartheid state. Karoline's caption was brutal. Waving this flag was bold. But honoring a Marine with our flag is performative? You've said enough, Ilhan. America sees the double standard. The video exploded. #performative hypocrisy trended number 1. Tucker Carlson replayed both clips side by side. Veterans groups chimed in. So did Gold Star families. And late that night, Karoline went live for 5 minutes, no lights, no makeup, no script. She looked into the camera and said, I didn't bring that flag for TV. I brought it because a mother asked me to. You want to call that performative? Fine. But it says more about you than it does about me. She ended with one sentence that would be quoted for days. You can't shame someone who's standing in truth. The comment sections were a tidal wave of support. From every state, every background, every age. Even some moderate Democrats quietly liked the post. Ilhan's camp tried to spin it, but the narrative was no longer in their hands. Karoline wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the people who still believed the flag meant something. And the nation was watching. The backlash reached a boiling point on the House floor. Ilhan Omar, clearly rattled by Karoline's viral posts and surging support, stood during a procedural motion and delivered an unscripted tirade. She didn't name Karoline. But everyone knew who she was talking about. Some of us weren't born with a silver spoon in our mouths. Some of us had to fight to be heard in a country that often told us we didn't belong. And now I see those same people using patriotism as a weapon. Well, I'm not afraid of flags, or of those who think this country belongs to them. She paused. Then she added, without blinking. This isn't your country to claim. The chamber fell into a shocked silence. And then Karoline stood. No staffer handed her a script. No aide whispered talking points. She simply walked to the well of the House. Her voice was calm. Cold. Controlled. Madam Speaker, I rise today not just for myself, but for the millions who still believe America is worth defending. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. My family didn't have a silver spoon either. My grandfather was a mechanic. My father worked nights. And none of them ever said, this isn't your country. Because they knew it was. Because they earned it. Because they loved it. The room froze. Ilhan glanced down. Karoline continued, eyes locked on the chamber. You say waving the flag is performative. You say honoring a Marine is theater. You say this isn't my country. I say, this country belongs to every American willing to fight for it, pray for it, and protect it, even when it's not easy. She turned her head, slowly scanning the chamber. And I'm not here to ask permission. I'm here to remind this place who it really serves. The press gallery erupted. Reporters fumbled over themselves getting the quote up first. Fox News ran the clip. So did CNN. Even C-SPAN's YouTube stream crossed 1 million views within the hour. Hashtag This Is My Country started trending alongside hashtag Karoline Rises. Back in her district, veterans held a rally, holding up folded flags, chanting her name. Karoline didn't plan it. But she had lit something none of them could contain. The war of words was over. What came next was something bigger. The chamber never fully returned to normal. Ilhan Omar left the floor shortly after Karoline's speech, no press statement, no post on X. Just silence. But Karoline? She didn't just walk out. She rose. As she stepped into the Capitol rotunda, reporters swarmed. Microphones were shoved toward her face. One shouted, "Are you calling Omar un-American?" Karoline didn't flinch. "I'm calling her out for forgetting what made this country worth coming to in the first place." The line hit like a hammer. She didn't stop for photos. She didn't stage a moment. Instead, she walked past the cameras and straight into the arms of 3 Vietnam veterans who'd come from Virginia to see her speak. One of them, in full uniform, looked her in the eye and said, "We waited a long time for someone to speak like that in there." Karoline smiled. But she didn't gloat. Back at her office, her staff watched the internet catch fire. Clips of her speech dominated TikTok, some with 2 million views in under 2 hours. One Gen Z influencer captioned her post. "She didn't just go viral. She spoke for us." Even some Democrats quietly messaged her chief of staff, "She made us uncomfortable, but she made her point." Ilhan's allies tried damage control. They posted out-of-context snippets, tried to paint Karoline as an extremist, tried to redirect the conversation back to race and immigration. But it didn't land. Because this moment, this one chamber, one flag, one voice moment, wasn't about identity. It was about America. That night, Karoline appeared on live television, not to gloat, not to escalate, but to clarify. This nation doesn't belong to politicians. It belongs to the people who still believe it's worth fighting for. And I'll stand for them every single time, even when it's unpopular. Especially when it's unpopular. The anchor paused, visibly moved. "You understand that wasn't just a soundbite, right?" Karoline nodded slowly. "It was a promise." The screen faded to black. And across the country, people didn't just watch. They stood. They talked. They remembered. And in the silence that followed, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt didn't just win an argument in Congress. She reminded America who it was. And who it could be again. When they try to rewrite what made this country great, I'll still be standing. When they mock our values, I'll still be speaking. Because truth doesn't flinch, and neither do I.